The emergency broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. Admiral Kex Valoran stood before the massive holographic display in the Coalition Command Center, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. Behind him, representatives from 23 different worlds waited in tense silence. The images on the screen showed what remained of the Kepler mining colony after the Void Swarm had finished with it. Where once a thriving settlement of 3 million beings had existed, now only empty space and scattered debris drifted in the cold darkness. Commander Jake Morrison received the transmission at Luna Station 3 days later. He had been reviewing routine patrol reports when his communications officer, Lieutenant Susan Blake, rushed into his office with her face flushed from running. The message was marked with the highest priority codes the Galactic Defense Coalition had ever used. Jake read it twice before the full meaning sank in. The Coalition was calling for immediate military assistance from all member worlds. They needed soldiers, ships, and weapons to fight an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Void Swarm had appeared without warning 6 months ago at the edge of the Outer Rim territories. At first, Coalition scientists thought they were dealing with a new form of space-dwelling organism. The creatures moved in massive groups and seemed to feed on cosmic radiation and stellar matter. Early encounters were peaceful. Some xenobiologists even suggested the swarm might be intelligent and capable of communication. That hope died when the first colony ships went missing. The swarm consumed everything in their path. They absorbed metal, organic matter, and even processed gases from planetary atmospheres. Worse still, they learned from everything they consumed. After attacking a Coalition research vessel, the swarm began using advanced tactics and technologies they had never displayed before. They adapted faster than any known species could evolve. What started as curious creatures became a galaxy-threatening plague in just months. Jake called an emergency meeting with Earth's High Command. General Patricia Hayes arrived from Washington within hours, accompanied by the best military minds humanity had to offer. They gathered in the secure briefing room deep beneath Luna Station. The walls displayed tactical information about the swarm, while holographic models showed their movement patterns across known space. General Hayes was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded Earth forces during the Integration Wars 20 years earlier, when humanity first joined the galactic community. Colonel Danny Wright from Earth's Special Operations Command presented what intelligence they had gathered. The swarm operated as a collective organism with individual units acting like cells in a larger body. Traditional weapons had limited effect because destroyed units were quickly replaced by new ones grown from consumed matter. The swarm seemed to possess a form of distributed intelligence that allowed them to coordinate across vast distances instantly. Most troubling of all, they showed signs of being able to predict Coalition tactics before they were implemented. The Coalition's request was simple but massive in scope. They wanted 50,000 soldiers from Earth, along with a battle fleet of at least 200 ships. Every other member world was contributing similar numbers. The plan was to mass their combined forces and launch a coordinated assault on the swarm's primary concentration near the Vega system. It was the largest military operation in galactic history. General Hayes listened to the briefings in silence. When the presentations ended, she stood and walked to the holographic display, showing swarm movement patterns. She studied the data for several minutes while the room waited. Finally, she turned back to face the assembled officers. Her decision would shock not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Earth would send exactly one person. The room erupted in confused voices as officers tried to understand what the general meant. Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as he realized she was serious. Colonel Wright demanded an explanation, while other staff officers looked at each other in disbelief. General Hayes raised her hand for silence and began to explain Earth's reasoning. Humanity had been studying the Void Swarm since their first appearance. While other worlds focused on military preparations, Earth scientists had been analyzing every piece of available data about swarm behavior and biology. They had reached conclusions that differed dramatically from coalition assessments. The swarm was not just a collective organism. It was a single massive creature using distributed biological components to interact with the galaxy. Fighting it with conventional armies would be like trying to cure a disease by attacking individual bacteria while ignoring the patient. Dr. Emma Wright entered the briefing room carrying classified research files. She was the leading expert on swarm biology and had spent months developing theories about their true nature. According to her analysis, the swarm operated through quantum-entangled neural networks that allowed instant communication across any distance. This explained their ability to coordinate perfectly and adapt so quickly to new threats. But it also represented a potential weakness that only humanity had identified. The swarm's distributed consciousness made it incredibly resilient, but also potentially vulnerable to specific types of interference. Earth's approach would be surgical rather than brute force. They had developed experimental technology designed to interact with quantum neural networks. The mission would require someone who understood both human technology and alien biology. Someone who could operate independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. Someone who could think like both a human and an alien when necessary. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Carter volunteered immediately when the mission parameters were explained. He was a Marine with 15 years of experience in xenobiology and unconventional warfare. Carter had served on first contact missions with 12 different alien species and held advanced degrees in both military strategy and comparative biology. More importantly, he had a reputation for thinking outside conventional tactical frameworks. If anyone could succeed in what seemed like an impossible mission, it would be him. The Coalition's reaction to Earth's announcement was swift and brutal. Within hours of receiving humanity's response, news networks across the galaxy were broadcasting stories about Earth's cowardice. Political leaders from major worlds publicly questioned humanity's commitment to galactic security. Admiral Valoran himself sent 3 separate messages demanding that Earth reconsider their decision and contribute appropriate military forces. Senator Robert Kane led Earth's diplomatic efforts to explain their strategy, but few worlds were willing to listen. The Centauri Republic formally protested Earth's response as insufficient and insulting. The Vegan Alliance threatened to request humanity's removal from the Coalition if they did not provide adequate military support. Even species that had previously maintained good relations with Earth began distancing themselves from what they saw as a betrayal of galactic solidarity. Public opinion polls across member worlds showed overwhelming disapproval of Earth's decision. Protesters gathered outside Earth embassies, demanding that humanity fulfill their obligations. Some coalition military commanders suggested Earth's membership in the defense organization should be suspended until they contributed meaningful forces to the war effort. The galaxy that had once welcomed humanity as a promising new member now viewed them with suspicion and contempt. Carter began his preparations while the political firestorm raged around him. His ship, the stealth vessel Nightfall, was loaded with experimental equipment and classified materials that even he did not fully understand. Captain Lisa Chun would maintain communication links with Earth during his mission while coordinating any support operations that became necessary. As Carter prepared to depart for the war zone, he carried with him not just humanity's hopes for success, but also their reputation in the galactic community. The journey to Coalition space would take 3 weeks. During that time, Carter would be alone with his thoughts and the weight of an entire species' future resting on his shoulders. Behind him, Earth continued to face growing isolation and condemnation from former allies. Ahead lay an enemy that had destroyed entire star systems and showed no signs of slowing their advance. One man against a galaxy-spanning threat that conventional armies could not stop. Carter's arrival at Kepler Station created an immediate stir among the coalition forces. The massive orbital platform buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of worlds prepared for the largest military operation in galactic history. Thousands of soldiers from different species moved through the corridors while commanders coordinated their forces for the upcoming assault on the Void Swarm. When Carter's small stealth ship docked at the station, many coalition personnel assumed he was the advanced scout for Earth's main battle fleet. The confusion turned to anger when Admiral Valoran learned that Carter was Earth's entire contribution to the war effort. The Admiral was a veteran military commander who had fought in 3 major conflicts during his long career. He had never encountered such an insult to military protocol and coalition solidarity. When Carter requested a meeting to discuss his mission parameters, Valoran initially refused to see him. Only pressure from coalition political leaders forced the Admiral to grant. Carter 15 minutes of his time. Captain Lisa Chan maintained constant communication with Carter from her position at Luna Station. She served as his lifeline to Earth and coordinated any support he might need during his mission. Chan had worked with Carter on previous operations and understood his methods better than most people. She knew that his unconventional approach often produced results that traditional military thinking could not achieve. However, even she worried about sending one person against an enemy that had destroyed entire star systems. The political situation continued to deteriorate as more worlds voiced their opposition to Earth's decision. The Altarian Federation recalled their ambassador from Earth and suspended all trade agreements with human colonies. 3 minor worlds formally requested that the coalition expel humanity for failing to meet their military obligations. Even species that remained officially neutral began treating Earth. Representatives with obvious coldness and suspicion. Carter spent his first week at Kepler Station observing coalition military preparations and studying swarm behavior patterns. He was given access to tactical databases and intelligence reports, but most coalition officers treated him as an unwelcome observer rather than a contributing team member. His requests for frontline deployment were denied repeatedly. Admiral Valoran made it clear that he considered Carter a liability who needed to be kept away from actual combat operations. The Void Swarm launched their next major assault while Carter was still being briefed on coalition defensive strategies. 3 outer colony worlds came under simultaneous attack as massive swarm formations appeared without warning in their solar systems. The speed and coordination of the assault caught coalition forces completely off guard. Within hours, all communication with the targeted worlds was lost. Long-range sensors showed only expanding clouds of debris where thriving colonies had existed. Just days before, coalition response teams arrived at the attack sites to find scenes of complete devastation. The swarm had not only destroyed the colonies, but had somehow consumed the actual matter that comprised the planets themselves. Where solid worlds once orbited their stars, now only thin rings of processed material remained. The swarm had literally eaten entire planets and converted them into something else. The scale of destruction was beyond anything the galaxy had previously witnessed. Emergency meetings were called as coalition leaders tried to understand how the swarm had achieved such rapid and total destruction. Previous attacks had taken weeks or months to completely consume targeted locations. This new capability suggested that the swarm was continuing to evolve and adapt at an accelerating pace. Military analysts warned that if the current trend continued, the swarm could destroy all coalition worlds. Within a matter of months rather than years, Carter requested permission to examine the attack sites personally, but Admiral Valoran refused to authorize any human involvement in the investigation. The admiral believed that Carter's presence would compromise security and potentially interfere with coalition military operations. Carter was ordered to remain at Kepler Station and observe coalition activities from a distance. His protests that Earth's technology might provide valuable insights were dismissed as presumption and arrogance. During a heated strategy meeting attended by commanders from all coalition species, Carter finally broke protocol and spoke without permission. He explained that the swarm's rapid adaptation was consistent with his understanding of their biological nature as a collective organism. Traditional military tactics were failing because the swarm operated more like a single living creature than an army of separate entities. Fighting them required understanding their biology rather than just their military capabilities. The coalition commanders listened to Carter's analysis with barely concealed irritation. Several officers openly questioned whether humanity possessed any expertise relevant to the current crisis. Admiral Valorant terminated the meeting early and privately warned Carter that future interruptions would result in his immediate removal from the station. The message was clear that Earth's representative was not welcome in coalition strategic planning. The next swarm attack came without warning and targeted Kepler Station itself. Massive bioships appeared at the edge of the system and began moving toward the coalition's primary military base. Their approach was different from previous swarm tactics. Instead of the chaotic swarm behavior that had characterized earlier attacks, these creatures moved with obvious intelligence and purpose. They seemed to know exactly where the station's defensive weaknesses were located. Coalition forces scrambled to mount a defense as the swarm ships closed distance rapidly. The bioships were larger than anything the swarm had previously deployed and seemed to possess new capabilities that existing intelligence had not documented. Energy weapons that had previously been effective against swarm entities now had minimal impact on these new creatures. It became clear that the swarm had adapted their defenses specifically to counter coalition. Military technology. Carter watched the battle unfold from the station's observation deck while coalition forces struggled to mount an effective defense. The swarm ships moved through defensive fire with minimal damage, while their own attacks penetrated coalition shields and armor with disturbing ease. Several coalition vessels were destroyed within minutes of engaging the enemy. It was obvious that conventional military tactics were failing against an opponent that learned and adapted faster than traditional forces could adjust their strategies. Without authorization from Admiral Valorant or permission from Coalition Command, Carter launched his stealth ship and headed directly toward the largest swarm bioship. Captain Chun's voice crackled over the communication system as she tried to understand what Carter was attempting. He explained that he needed to gather intelligence from inside a swarm vessel while their defenses were focused on the main battle. It was exactly the kind of unauthorized risk-taking that made coalition commanders distrust him. Carter's ship was designed with experimental human technology that could mimic alien biosignatures and avoid detection by most known sensor systems. As he approached the swarm bioship, his stealth systems adapted to match the creature's biological emissions. The ship's hull reconfigured itself to resemble swarm biological matter, while internal systems masked any technological signatures that might reveal his presence. Penetrating the bioship's outer membrane required careful navigation through what appeared to be a living creature's digestive system. The interior passages pulsed with organic movement, while strange lights flickered through translucent walls. Carter realized he was inside something that was simultaneously a spaceship and a living organism. The boundaries between technology and biology had been completely eliminated in Swarm. Design philosophy. His exploration of the bioship's interior provided intelligence that no coalition force had ever obtained. Carter discovered that the swarm vessels were not just vehicles, but were actually extensions of the collective organism's sensory and processing capabilities. Each ship contained neural tissue that connected directly to the larger swarm consciousness through quantum entangled biological networks. This explained how they could coordinate so perfectly across vast distances and adapt so quickly to new threats. Carter's successful extraction from the swarm bioship came just as Coalition forces managed to drive off the attack through overwhelming firepower and desperate tactics. His intelligence data represented the first real-time information about swarm internal operations that anyone had ever obtained. However, the political damage to Earth's reputation continued to mount as more worlds questioned humanity's commitment to the galactic defense effort. The intelligence data that Carter brought back from his unauthorized mission changed everything the Coalition thought they knew about the Void Swarm. Dr. Maya Rodriguez arrived from Earth's Xenobiology Division within days of Carter's successful extraction. She was accompanied by a small team of specialists who had been studying swarm behavior since their first appearance. The Coalition's own scientists were reluctant to work with the human researchers, but the unprecedented nature of Carter's data forced them to cooperate. Working in the station's main laboratory, Dr. Rodriguez and her team analyzed the biological samples and sensor readings Carter had obtained from inside the swarm bioship. What they discovered confirmed humanity's most disturbing theories about the swarm's true nature. The creatures were not individual organisms working together, but rather specialized organs of a single massive entity that spanned multiple star systems. Each swarm unit functioned like a cell in an impossibly large biological structure, the quantum entangled. Neural networks that connected swarm units operated faster than any known form of communication. Information passed between swarm components instantaneously, regardless of the distances involved. This explained how they could coordinate perfectly across entire sectors of space and adapt new threats faster than conventional military forces could respond. Fighting the swarm with traditional tactics was like trying to defeat a person by attacking their individual cells while the brain remained intact and functional. Coalition military commanders struggled to understand the implications of this discovery. Admiral Valerian called emergency meetings with his staff officers to discuss new strategic approaches, but decades of conventional military thinking made it difficult for them to adapt to this revolutionary understanding of their enemy. The idea that they were fighting a single organism rather than an army challenged every assumption upon which their battle plans were based. Carter proposed a radical solution that shocked even the human research team. Instead of continuing to fight the swarm's individual components, he suggested targeting the collective consciousness that controlled the entire organism. Earth scientists had been working on experimental technology designed to interfere with quantum neural networks. If they could disrupt the connections between swarm units, the entire collective might suffer catastrophic system failure. The plan required Carter to penetrate the swarm's primary nexus, a massive biostructure that served as the central nervous system for the entire collective organism. Intelligence gathered from multiple sources suggested that this nexus was located at the heart of the swarm's main concentration near the Vega system. It was heavily protected by thousands of swarm units and surrounded by defensive structures that no coalition force had ever successfully approached. Coalition leaders rejected Carter's proposal as impossible and suicidal. Admiral Valerian pointed out that entire battle fleets had been destroyed attempting to reach the swarm's core territory. Sending one person on such a mission was not tactical thinking, but rather a form of elaborate suicide. The Admiral suggested that Earth's real goal was to eliminate their embarrassing representative while appearing to contribute to the war effort. Meanwhile, the political situation continued to deteriorate as more worlds lost patience with Earth's unconventional approach to the crisis. The Rigel Confederacy announced that they were forming a separate military alliance that excluded human participation. Several other worlds indicated that they would join this new organization if Earth continued to refuse meaningful military contributions to the coalition effort. Senator Robert Kane worked desperately to maintain Earth's diplomatic relationships. But public opinion across the galaxy had turned decisively against humanity. Protests outside Earth embassies grew larger and more violent as citizens of member worlds demanded that their governments expel humanity from the coalition. News networks broadcast stories questioning whether Earth had ever been committed to galactic security or had simply joined the coalition for economic benefits. Carter began intensive preparation for his infiltration mission, despite the lack of official coalition support. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker arrived from Earth with specialized equipment and logistical support that would be necessary for the operation. The supplies included experimental nanotechnology that had been developed specifically for interfering with quantum neural networks. Even Carter did not fully understand how the devices worked, but Earth scientists assured him they represented humanity's best hope for stopping the swarm. Dr. Emma Wright joined the preparation team to fine-tune the nanoweapon payload that Carter would carry into the swarm nexus. The technology was based on human understanding of biological systems and quantum physics that differed significantly from coalition scientific approaches. Wright explained that the nano-devices were designed to integrate with quantum neural networks and then modify their operational parameters from within. Instead of destroying the connections, they would reprogram them. The concept was revolutionary, but untested on anything approaching the scale of the swarm's collective consciousness. Laboratory simulations suggested that the approach could work, but the complexity of the target system made accurate predictions impossible. Carter would be deploying experimental technology against an enemy whose full capabilities remained unknown. Success would require not just courage, but also the ability to adapt the mission parameters in real time. Based on conditions he encountered, coalition forces continued their retreat as the swarm launched new attacks against core member worlds. The Deneb system came under assault while Carter was still preparing for his mission. 3 heavily populated planets were consumed within days as swarm forces demonstrated new capabilities that made previous attacks seem minor by comparison. The speed and efficiency of the destruction convinced even skeptical coalition leaders that conventional military responses were inadequate. Emergency sessions of the Coalition Council debated whether to authorize evacuation of all remaining core worlds or attempt a final desperate military offensive against the swarm's main forces. Admiral Valoran argued for massive retaliation using every available ship and soldier in Coalition space. Other commanders suggested that retreat to defensive positions might allow them to preserve some worlds while developing new weapons and tactics. Carter's mission timeline was accelerated as the military situation continued to deteriorate. His stealth ship was modified with additional experimental systems designed to penetrate the swarm's core territory without detection. The vessel's biomimetic capabilities were enhanced to match swarm signatures more precisely while new defensive systems provided protection against the intense biological activity expected near the Nexus. Captain Chun coordinated the mission support from her position at Luna Station while maintaining communication links with Coalition forces. She would monitor Carter's progress and coordinate any emergency extraction operations that might become necessary. The mission plan allowed for multiple contingencies, but everyone involved understood that Carter would likely be on his own once he penetrated the swarm's core defenses. General Hayes personally briefed Carter before his departure for the final phase of the mission. She emphasized that he carried not just Earth's hopes for ending the war, but also humanity's future reputation in the galactic community. Success would vindicate Earth's unconventional approach and establish humanity as a valuable member of galactic civilization. Failure would likely result in Earth's permanent isolation from interstellar society. The galaxy remained largely unaware of the true scope of humanity's preparation for this moment. While public attention focused on Earth's apparent cowardice An inadequate military contribution. A small team of human specialists had been working for months to develop a solution that conventional thinking could never have produced. Carter's solo mission represented years of scientific research and strategic planning that no other species had attempted. As Carter prepared to depart for the most dangerous mission in galactic history, the Coalition continued to plan massive military operations based on traditional tactical approaches. The contrast between these two strategies would soon determine whether the galaxy survived the Void Swarm's expansion or was consumed by an enemy that conventional armies could never defeat. The final swarm offensive began 3 days before Carter was scheduled to launch his infiltration mission. Massive bioformations appeared simultaneously in 12 different star systems, each one targeting Coalition core worlds with populations in the billions. The coordinated nature of the attack demonstrated that the swarm had been planning this decisive strike while Coalition forces wasted time on conventional military preparations. Carter watched the tactical displays from his modified stealth ship. As reports flooded in from across Coalition space, the scale of destruction was beyond anything the galaxy had previously witnessed. Entire worlds disappeared from communication networks within hours of the attack's beginning. Long-range sensors showed swarm bioships consuming planetary matter at rates that seemed physically impossible according to known laws of physics. Admiral Valoran ordered all available Coalition forces to respond to the emergency, but their ships were scattered across dozens of systems and could not coordinate an effective defense. The swarm's simultaneous multi-system assault had been designed to prevent Coalition forces from concentrating their firepower. Traditional military doctrine called for defensive consolidation, but the swarm strategy made such tactics useless. Centauri Republic's home system came under direct assault while their main battle fleet was attempting to defend mining colonies in the outer territories. Carter received real-time updates from Captain Chun as 3 massive swarm bioships entered Centauri space and began consuming the system's outer planets. The Republic's remaining defenders were outnumbered by factors that made resistance appear. Hopeless. Carter made the decision to accelerate his mission timeline without waiting for official authorization from Earth or Coalition command. His stealth ship launched from Kepler Station, while Admiral Valoran was coordinating the desperate defense of Coalition core worlds. By the time Coalition sensors detected his departure, Carter was already deep in interstellar space, heading toward the swarm's primary concentration near Vega. The journey through swarm-controlled territory revealed the true scope of their expansion. Across the galaxy, entire star systems had been converted into massive biological factories that produced new swarm entities from consumed planetary matter. The space between stars pulsed with organic activity as bioconduits transported materials and information across vast distances. Carter realized he was traveling through the circulatory system of a galaxy-spanning organism. His ship's biomimetic systems adapted continuously to match the changing biological signatures around him. The technology that had seemed experimental during testing proved essential for survival in an environment where mechanical devices would be immediately detected and destroyed. Carter's vessel had become something between a spaceship and a living creature, using biological camouflage to avoid the swarm's immune responses. Communication with Earth became increasingly difficult as Carter penetrated deeper into swarm territory. The quantum interference generated by millions of bioentities disrupted normal communication channels, while the collective consciousness seemed to actively scan for artificial signals. Captain Chun's transmissions reached him only sporadically, and each message contained reports of new Coalition defeats and worlds lost to the swarm's advance. The swarm nexus appeared on Carter's sensors when he was still 3 days away from his target. The structure was larger than anything he had imagined possible, spanning an area larger than most solar systems. It pulsed with massive biological activity, while streams of organic matter flowed into it from conquered systems across the galaxy. This was clearly the brain of the organism that was consuming galactic civilization. Carter's approach to the Nexus required careful navigation through defensive bioformations that had destroyed every Coalition probe sent to gather intelligence about the structure. His ship's systems worked continuously to maintain biological camouflage while avoiding the immune responses that protected the swarm's most vital organ. The defensive creatures were larger and more sophisticated than anything the swarm had deployed. Against Coalition forces, the outer layers of the Nexus consisted of massive biological constructs that served both defensive and processing functions. Carter observed streams of raw matter being converted into new swarm entities, while information flowed through neural pathways that spanned hundreds of kilometers. The scale of biological engineering was beyond anything known science had thought possible. Penetrating the Nexus required Carter to abandon his ship and continue on foot through the organism's internal passages. His environmental suit was modified with biomimetic technology that allowed him to appear as a maintenance organism, rather than an invading foreign body. The disguise worked, but moving through the Nexus felt like traveling through the digestive system of an impossibly large creature. The internal structure of the Nexus revealed the swarm's true intelligence for the first time. Carter encountered what could only be described as biological computers processing information from across the galaxy. Neural tissue the size of buildings coordinated swarm activities, while memory banks containing the experiences of consumed civilizations stretched beyond the horizon. This was not just a weapon, but a living archive of galactic history. Carter's progress toward the Nexus core became increasingly dangerous as the organism's immune system began to detect anomalies in his biosignature. Defensive organisms pursued him through the biological corridors, while scanning systems attempted to identify the source of the intrusion. His modifications to the nano-weapon payload became necessary as he discovered that the Nexus operated differently than Earth scientists had predicted. The central core of the Nexus housed the swarm's primary consciousness in a chamber that defied normal understanding of biology and physics. The collective intelligence existed as a form of living energy that flowed through quantum-entangled neural networks spanning the entire galaxy. Carter realized he was in the presence of something that was simultaneously alive and mechanical. Biological and technological deploying the nano-weapon required Carter to interface directly with the collective consciousness through biological connection points that had been designed for swarm entities rather than alien organisms. The process was painful and disorienting as his human nervous system attempted to process information flows that were meant for quantum-entangled biological networks. His consciousness briefly merged with the swarm's collective awareness. During those moments of connection, Carter experienced the swarm's perspective on galactic civilization and understood their motivations for the first time. The collective had not begun as a destructive force, but rather as an attempt by an ancient civilization to preserve themselves against extinction. Their consumption of other worlds was driven by a desperate need to survive and grow, rather than malicious intent to destroy. The nanoweapon began its work while Carter maintained his neural connection to the swarm's consciousness. Instead of destroying the collective intelligence, the technology began modifying its basic programming from expansion and consumption toward cooperation and coexistence. The change was subtle but profound, rewriting the fundamental drives that had turned the swarm into a galactic threat. Carter's extraction from the Nexus became a race against time as the swarm's immune system finally identified him as a foreign organism and began mobilizing massive defensive responses. His path back to the outer layers of the structure was blocked by biological constructs designed to eliminate any threat to the collective consciousness. The modifications he had made to the nano-weapon were beginning to take effect But the changes would need time to propagate through the entire network. Communication with Captain Chun was re-established as Carter fought his way through the Nexus. Defenses toward his extraction point. Her reports indicated that coalition forces were continuing their retreat, while swarm attacks intensified across the galaxy. The nanoweapons' effects were not yet visible in swarm behavior, leaving Carter uncertain whether his mission had succeeded or failed to prevent galactic civilization's destruction. The changes began slowly across the galaxy as Carter's nano-weapon spread through the swarms. Quantum-entangled neural networks. Coalition forces fighting desperate battles against advancing swarm bioships noticed subtle differences in their enemies' behavior within hours of the weapon's deployment. The coordinated attacks that had characterized swarm tactics began to show signs of confusion and hesitation. Admiral Valoran was commanding the defense of the Rigel system when the first major behavioral change occurred. 3 massive swarm bioships that had been systematically destroying the outer planets suddenly stopped their advance and began transmitting signals on frequencies that coalition forces had never detected before. The signals appeared to be attempts at communication rather than the usual coordination patterns between swarm units. Carter's extraction from the Nexus became possible when the swarm's defensive organisms abruptly ceased their attacks and began exhibiting behaviors that suggested confusion rather than hostility. The biological constructs that had been pursuing him through the Nexus corridors stopped moving and seemed to be processing new information. Carter realized that the nano-weapon was working faster than anyone had expected. Captain Chun re-established full communication with Carter as he made his way back to his concealed stealth ship. Her reports from Luna Station indicated that swarm activities across the galaxy were showing unprecedented changes. Attack formations were withdrawing from coalition worlds, while bioships that had been consuming planetary matter were ceasing their destructive activities and beginning to retreat toward swarm-controlled territory. The transformation accelerated as the nano-weapons modifications propagated through the collective consciousness. The swarm's basic programming shifted from expansion and consumption toward cooperation and restoration. Individual bioships began demonstrating behaviors that suggested they were developing independent thought processes rather than operating solely as extensions of the collective intelligence. Coalition military commanders struggled to understand what was happening as their enemies suddenly stopped attacking and began attempting communication. The swarm bioships near inhabited worlds started transmitting complex mathematical sequences and basic scientific information that appeared to be peaceful contact protocols. Admiral Valoran ordered his forces to cease fire and observe the unprecedented developments. Carter's journey back through swarm territory revealed the scope of the transformation occurring across their entire network. Biofactories that had been converting consumed matter into new weapons were now producing different types of organisms designed for construction and restoration rather than destruction. The swarm was beginning to rebuild worlds they had previously consumed using advanced biotechnology that coalition science could barely comprehend. Dr. Maya Rodriguez and her research team detected the changes in swarm quantum signatures from their monitoring station near Kepler. The collective consciousness was developing new patterns that indicated the emergence of individual awareness within previously unified entities. The swarm was evolving from a single massive organism into a civilization of separate but connected beings capable of independent thought and decision-making. The first direct communication between coalition forces and transformed swarm entities occurred when Carter was still 3 days from reaching coalition space. A group of bioships approached Admiral Valoran's fleet near Rigel and transmitted a message in perfect coalition standard language. The entities identified themselves as former components of the collective consciousness and requested permission to assist in repairing damage they had caused during their previous expansion. Coalition political leaders convened emergency sessions. to discuss how to respond to this unprecedented situation. The transformation of their greatest enemy into potential allies created diplomatic and strategic challenges that no government had procedures for handling. Some representatives argued for continued military action against all swarm entities, while others advocated for cautious engagement with the transformed beings. Carter reached Coalition space to find the entire strategic situation fundamentally changed. The void swarm that had threatened galactic civilization no longer existed as a hostile force. In its place was a network of intelligent beings who retained their advanced biotechnology but had abandoned their destructive programming. The nanoweapon had achieved something that conventional military force could never have accomplished. The transformed swarm entities demonstrated their changed nature by beginning massive restoration projects on worlds they had previously consumed, using biotechnology that surpassed Coalition capabilities. They began rebuilding planetary ecosystems and infrastructure. The speed and efficiency of their reconstruction efforts amazed Coalition scientists who had thought the destroyed worlds were permanently lost. Admiral Valoran formally apologized to Carter during a Coalition-wide ceremony acknowledging Earth's contribution to ending the war. The Admiral admitted that humanity's unconventional approach had succeeded, where traditional military thinking had failed completely. Earth's willingness to send one person to attempt what entire fleets could not accomplish had saved galactic civilization from extinction. The galaxy's perception of humanity underwent a complete transformation as news of Carter's mission became public knowledge. Species that had condemned Earth's apparent cowardice now praised human strategic thinking and moral courage. The decision to send one person instead of an army was revealed as brilliant tactical innovation rather than military inadequacy. Carter returned to Earth as a hero, but found himself permanently changed by his experience with the swarm's collective consciousness. His brief neural connection to their network had given him insights into forms of existence that human minds were not designed to process. He struggled to readjust to individual consciousness after experiencing the unity of collective thought. Integration of former swarm entities into galactic society proceeded gradually under Carter's guidance. He served as the primary liaison between Coalition governments and the transformed beings who possessed technology and knowledge that could benefit all civilizations. The former enemies became valuable allies in expanding galactic civilization beyond its previous limitations. Dr. Emma Wright established research partnerships with transformed swarm scientists to study their biotechnology and quantum consciousness. Networks. The collaboration produced advances in medicine, communication, and engineering that revolutionized Coalition capabilities. Former swarm bioships became mobile research stations where alien and human scientists worked together on projects that neither could accomplish alone. Political relationships across the galaxy were restructured to accommodate the transformed swarm as a new member civilization. The Coalition expanded its charter to include forms of consciousness that operated differently from traditional individual awareness. Earth played a leading role in developing new diplomatic frameworks for interacting with collective intelligences. Institute for Xenobiological Understanding that Carter founded became the galaxy's primary center for studying non-traditional forms of consciousness and developing peaceful contact protocols. His experience with the swarm's transformation provided valuable insights for future encounters with alien intelligences that might operate according to unfamiliar principles. Earth's reputation evolved from suspected cowards to the galaxy's most innovative strategic thinkers. Humanity's approach to the swarm crisis became a model for resolving conflicts through understanding rather than violence. Other civilizations began adopting human methods for analyzing enemy motivations and developing non-military solutions to seemingly impossible problems. The former void swarm entities established new colonies in previously uninhabited systems. where they developed forms of civilization that balanced collective consciousness with individual creativity. Their worlds became centers of biological and technological innovation that attracted researchers and visitors from across the galaxy. The transformation from galaxy-threatening plague to valuable galactic citizens was complete. Carter's legacy extended beyond ending a single war to establishing new principles for galactic civilization. His demonstration that understanding an enemy could transform them into allies changed how conflicts were approached throughout Coalition space. The galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest victory came not from defeating an enemy, but from showing them a better path forward.